Hey guys, Sig here. So today I have for you guys my first attempt at going through a Heroes of the Storm character rework. And that character is Tyrande, who is a support character. And I'm super excited about doing this video, first and foremost, because support is my preferred role in Heroes of the Storm. And Tyrande has been in a really weird place in the game for quite a while. And secondly, because Tyrande is Bae for me. Tyrande is my most played character in Heroes of the Storm. She was the only character that I got to the mastery skin level before Heroes 2.0, and she's still my most played character. And I hardly played her at all during her previous rework iterations. So I feel like that speaks a lot to how much time I've spent on the character and how much I enjoy playing her. A lot of that is also influenced from my background in World of Warcraft, where the Night Elf wasn't the first race that I rolled in World of Warcraft, but it was definitely the first character that I fell in love with in my time playing World of Warcraft when I rolled a Night Elf Druid. So, obviously, I really enjoyed Malfurion also. But yeah, not just like... I enjoyed the character so much that I, at this point, started to actually look into the lore of World of Warcraft, because unfortunately I didn't have a PC to be able to play Warcraft 3 when that was a thing. And so just like through this whole process came to really love the Night Elf class. And so Tyrande is all of these things: Night Elf Priestess, Ranger General of the Sentinels, my favorite character in the game. But you guys aren't here to hear me babble about her. Let's talk about the rework. So, I mentioned to you guys, Tyrande has been in a kind of weird place in the game for a while now. In that, so, in old Tyrande, she's, as I said, a support character, but beyond just healing her allies, she provides a lot of utility to her allies, like such as warding across the battlefield with her global range Sentinel ability, and with her True Shot aura adding passive basic attack damage to her allies. Things like this beyond healing. But you could essentially choose through her talents, did you want to put more power into her healing ability or more power like into her damage or utility. But when they reworked her, they really just wound up putting a lot of focus into her Sentinel ability and gave it a baseline quest. And so, the way to play Tyrande, she could no longer solo heal. She could only really succeed in the double support meta, which didn't help her even more because the double support meta was nerfed off at the end of last year. So the only way that people really played her was that she couldn't really heal her teammates, but she could heal herself well. And so she had really good 1v1 self-sustain, and so could duel pretty much anybody in the game. And moreover, the way her Sentinel baseline quests and talents work together, you could do some pretty sick damage late game with Sentinel, especially the further across the battlefield you hit someone from. And relating also to the matchmaking system of Heroes of the Storm, Tyrande was she was in a special class of supports with Tassadar Medivh and Abathur, and so all the time you had Tyrande matched up against Abathur. And so Abathur, likes to hide off, not seen anywhere, somewhere on the map, but Tyrande would just launch her Sentinel down the map, and late game, whenever she stacked the quest up, she can one-shot Abathur, basically. So it was no fun for the Abathurs, and the way that the Tyrande did this was by using her vision ability to just like every time it was off cooldown, spam it into as many people as you could. So you weren't using the ability intelligently or in the way that it was meant to be used. So Blizzard in their rework of the character approached a lot of that. They wanted to rework out the focus on owl spamming and give her more of her healing capacity back. So, knowing the concept, let's look into her basic kit first. So, starting off, her basic attack damage was cut by a third. Ouch. No more ranged assassin Tyrande. They did increase her range by half a unit, though, which probably seems insignificant, but it actually puts her slightly above the average of the ranged average, which is 5.5. So, the only characters that outranged Tyrande at this point are Anna, Eric, Hanzo, and Nova, who all have a range of 6.5, and then Siege Mode Hammer, who is all the way out at 11. Moving on to her Q ability, her healing ability, they slightly buffed the healing amount of it, but they increased its cooldown by 1/3. But the trade-off for this is that they slightly have reworked her Q, and that it is now 2 charges. And the charges refresh simultaneously, and Tyrande can reduce the amount of cooldown she has remaining from the baseline 15 seconds by 1.5 seconds for every basic attack that she lands against a hero, or every basic ability that she hits with. They also, thankfully, decreased the mana cost of Q by 2/3. Awesome. Moving on to her next ability, her Sentinel ability, they nerfed the damage of this ability by 27%. Again, they're really choking out the Owlspan build in this rework. They buffed the cooldown of the ability, though, by 16.5%. And then they buffed its mana cost, or they reduced its mana cost by almost 30%. Looking at her E ability, which is her skill shot stun ability, they once again reduced the damage 23%. They also nerfed the range on it from 25 to 15, which is a 40% change. Looking at her trait, which is Hunter's Mark, which whenever you apply it to a hero, it reduces their armor by a certain amount. They nerfed that armor reduction from a value of 25 to 15, which is a 40% change. But they give it some nerfs, or they give it some buffs back in the talents that we'll get to. Looking at the range of her trait, the cast range of it, this also was increased to 6 from 5.5. So a slight buff there. The biggest change in her ultimate was to her Shadow Stalk ability, where it had its cooldown increased by 1/3. But it also has been reworked into being a healing cooldown again, where now whoever it stealths on your team, which it stealths everyone, it also heals them for 400 over 10 seconds at level 10. So, all that said, let's take a look at her talent tree changes now. So at level 1, her 3 quests were moved to totally different places in the talent tree, and her level 4 talents were brought down and slightly altered. Moonlit Arrows was slightly nerfed in its QCD reduction from 0.75 to 0.25 seconds, but so the way this works is Tyrande has an attack speed of 1 1/3, so that means for every 3 seconds she lands 4 basic attacks. And so if she's able to just constantly land attacks on enemies, baseline, her 15-second QCD is actually 6 seconds. And if you pick up this talent, it reduces that down to you can reload Q in 3.7 seconds if you can just land basic attacks uninterrupted. Celestial Attunement was changed that it no longer grants the free cast after cleanse that it used to, which was moved into the second charge baseline, but it now removes all stuns, silences, and slows. Having this ability at level 1 is incredibly strong. A baseline semi-hard cleanse is awesome. They slightly nerfed Caldori Resistance, the spell armor, and that it now grants 15 spell armor for 3 seconds instead of 6, and this stacks up to 2 times instead of 3. But this still can be pretty strong if you're having to play into a composition of 2 to 3 mages, being able to just, with cooldown and with basic attacks, spread spell armor all over your team, reducing the amount of ability damage that they're taking. So let's move on to level 4 now. So 2 of the talents on level 4 were replaced with 2 of the talents from level 1. And the first one was Ranger, which was what enhanced, it was her previous W quest. And they slightly buffed it in that its travel distance bonus damage has been buffed from 75% to 150% bonus damage. But they've also given it a new active ability with a 30-second cooldown that makes your next Sentinel pierce all targets. And so this is the trade-off in Tyrande losing her previous baseline W quest, where after you hit a certain number of enemies, it would cause Sentinel to start to pierce the heroes that it hit. And so that was how, like, over the course of a game, and you just throwing it into as many bodies as possible, 15 minutes into a game, Sentinel now hits all heroes that it comes into contact with, and the further it travels, the more damage it does. So you're just blowing people up from across the map. They slightly changed the Lunar Blaze quest in that this is where you previously had to take a talent to increase the range of Lunar Blaze, and they've just baked that into this quest now, where your range is increased by 50%, and now hitting heroes increases the damage by 5% up to a cap of 100%. Then the last ability she got at level 4 was True Shot Aura came down from level 7, and it has been slightly changed, where now it gives Tyrande a passive basic attack damage increase of 20%, which previously it just granted all your allies 10% basic attack damage. And it now the active ability resets your trait, your Hunter's Mark, and grants all allies around you 20% basic attack damage. So it's even actually a buff from the 10% that they previously got. So, looking at her level 7 tier, 2 of her talents went up to level 16, and 2 level 16 talents came down to replace them. And then, as I said, True Shot Aura was moved down to the tier previous. So, True Shot Aura was replaced with a new talent called Everlasting Light, which causes your Q ability to heal more when you use it on a second target, different from your original target. So this has really great synergy with just like a Q spam build, just like a straight sustain build. The 2 abilities that went up were Huntress's Fury and Darnassian Archery, which were 2 damage talents, and they were replaced by these 2 healing talents at level 16. So again, even in the talent decisions they're making, they're moving Tyrande so that she has more early game healing viability and less early game damage instead. Mark Amending causes basic attacks against marked targets to heal the attacker for 2% now instead of 3% of the maximum HP. And Alun's Chosen was buffed actually in that its duration was increased from 5 seconds to 10 seconds and its cooldown reduced from 40 seconds to 30 seconds. And so again, with Tyrande's 1 and the 3rd attack speed, she can get off 13 shots before this active ability is gone, which means that if you can just land basic attacks while you have Alun's Chosen up, it'll heal for 1365 at level 7. This is crazy good healing for like Diablo or these other tanks that have really high health pools. Looking at level 10, her ultimate abilities. So I mentioned to you guys already that Shadowstalk got reworked in exchange for an increased cooldown, where it's no longer a personal damage CD for Tyrande, where she would just stealth herself to break it for the 50% attack speed buff, and that it now is a support ability again, and that all the heroes that it stealths, it also heals them over 10 seconds. Starfall didn't really get any change, but it is worth noting that every time Starfall hits an enemy hero, that counts as a basic ability hitting a hero, so that counts towards your QCD. So you can actually get off a great amount of healing through your Q output if you drop Starfall in an area where the enemy team is concentrated. Looking at our level 13 tier, Quickening Blessing and Harsh Moonlight are still here. Quickening Blessing got slightly nerfed in that it was nerfed from granting allies 30% additional move speed on Q heal to 20%, with 30% being mount move speed in the game. But it now also grants Tyrande herself passive 10% move speed. So this is really helpful for dodging skill shots and adding to your own survivability, as well as adding to the survivability of your teammates whenever you heal them and grant them their movement speed. Harsh Moonlight actually got a great buff in that both the slow and the damage reduction against heroes were changed from 25% to 40%. So the additional change in the level 13 tier was Empower was moved to level 16, and this is where the other quest from level 1, the trait quest, comes back into play. And I previously really disliked the trait quest on Tyrande, whereas every 50 basic attacks against heroes increases the amount of uptime on your trait by 1 second, to now it's just whenever you have Hunter's Mark up on a target, hitting them with your basic attack extends the duration that Hunter's Mark is on them. So, like, this is just, like, way more intuitive to me than what the previous iteration was. And moreover, it rewards you for capitalizing on your Hunter's Mark within the window that you're using it, instead of, again, like the bad gameplay of the W build, where if you were going the trait build on Tyrande previously, you were just like trying to land basic attacks on anything you could all the game. And like if you couldn't get basic attacks off, you couldn't get value out of your trait quest line. So this is much better. And to just note how long Tyrande can keep this up, she can keep the Hunter's Mark up for a maximum of 11.5 seconds whenever you take this talent. This is compared to its 4 seconds baseline that the ability is up. So you can chunk a lot of damage against a high health pool tank for 11.5 seconds of minus 15% armor. That's great. And then, moreover, just forecasting level 20, if you take the Ice Blade Arrows talent, you can keep this up for up to 28 seconds. The cooldown on your trait resets before you're able to drop it off if you can just land basic attacks. It's much better to use now, and is much more intuitive to use. Looking at Tyrande's level 16, this is where they decided to give her her damage power spike. So, starting with Empower, which was brought up from level 13, it now passively reduces your cooldown on Sentinel from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. And it no longer grants the CD reduction like it used to. This is another one of the things that contributed to Tyrande being able to just put out stupid damage late game, where the more heroes she hit, the more damage she did, and it reloaded the cooldown on W basically instantly if you could hit the whole team. So you could just send them out over and over. So they removed that component, but they added now to it that the first enemy that your Sentinel hits will take an additional 7% of their HP damage, or additional 7% of their health as damage. So it's not as strong as it used to be, but they still have put a lot of damage into this talent. Their other two talents are, these, remember I said, came up from level 7, where the first one is Huntress's Fury, which buffs her trait. And so they nerfed the cast range buff from 50% to 25%, and it now causes basic attacks to splash to all enemies, where it previously I think was just heroes. And it also now passively increases the trait's duration by 1 second. So if you also previously took Mark Amending and are doing the auto attack D build, you're just adding more synergy through this talent. Last we have Darnassian Archery, which was buffed in that your basic attacks against heroes grant a stacking 10% attack damage buff now instead of 5%, and it lasts for 8 seconds, up from 4 seconds. And so, remember this also doubles your synergy with Elun's Chosen, where you put Elun's Chosen up on your tank, and then you just start landing your basic attack shots, and the more damage you deal, the more you heal your tank for. But with Darnassian Archery, if you're able to stack this up a few times and get up to, you know, an extra, like, 50%, well, it's really difficult to get to 50% attack damage, but, like, you can, like, start off with 20-25% additional damage, and then pop your Elun's Chosen, and you will get an enormous heal and, like, throughput out of that talent. Finally, we have the Storm tier, level 20. So, all of the abilities are still the same as they were previously. They've just gotten some little tweaks. Eye of the Huntress, your Shadow Stalk upgrade, it got nerfed in that it reveals enemies for 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds, but the new heal component that you got added to it is increased by 50% for heroes who are under 50% of their health. Celestial's Wrath was slightly tweaked in that it previously applied your Hunter's Mark to heroes that it hit, and now it just automatically applies it to any hero standing in its little ring of area. So there's not that RNG component to it of when the hero gets hit. And again, remember, if you're playing with the Q build especially, you'll get some massive QCD reduction and additional damage out and additional healing out through that with taking this talent upgrade. Shooting Star was changed from, previously it was every 10th basic attack against the hero casts Lunar Flare, and now it's every 8th basic attack does it. And it can now also hit non-heroes. It still prefers heroes, but it can now hit the minions as well. So this can wind up giving you a little bit of wave clear late game also, which is always helpful. And then finally we have Ice Blade arrows that I mentioned to you guys previously. Basic attacks against heroes now reduce their damage dealt by 8%, up from 5%, for 3 seconds, up for 2 seconds, and it now stacks up to 5 times instead of 10. But if you do the math on this, it turns out that your max damage reduction has been nerfed from 50% to 40%, but you reach this cap a lot faster. It previously took you 8 seconds to get up to that 50% damage reduction, and now you get to the 40% damage reduction in half the time, in 4 seconds. And you can combine this also with the Harsh Moonlight talent from level 13 to get up to 80% damage reduction on a hero. So, to close this all out for you guys, to summarize all this, they nerfed her basic attack and ability damage, but they moved a lot of that power into her healing abilities and talents. So she's not as strong and reliable of a duelist as what she previously was, but that doesn't mean that she can't still duel. She definitely can still duel. Looking at the build changes that she had to what they are now, rest in peace, Owl build. It's still actually like... It's not the best healing compared to the other builds, but this is actually still a viable build path, and it's also the easiest build path to get value out of. It's the most reliable build path. If you are not really comfortable with like staying in a fight and stutter stepping to dodge damage to be able to consistently land basic attacks without putting yourself at risk of taking damage also, if you want to hang back more, definitely go for W builds still and provide the additional utility of like the slows and the damage reduction for your teammates. The D build I mentioned for you guys now is, in my opinion, much easier to use and a lot better to get value out of. I'm very happy with the changes to the D quest. And I would also say here, both her E and her D quests and builds, they've been altered to make the gameplay less focused on spamming your abilities and more on using the abilities wisely and getting value from the quick moments in which you're using them. Given the way that they reshuffled her talents I mentioned to you guys, she has a lot more impactful early game, especially when focused on healing and supporting her allies, and her damage was moved to later in the game. She can get out a lot of healing now. Like, this is going to be a pretty big change for people to adjust to in the game, that for so long it's just been known that Tyrande can't heal. Tyrande's not a solo support. And so probably expect to get flamed in the first couple of weeks, the people not knowing about these changes and not knowing that Tyrande is going to be pretty strong whenever she comes out. And I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm also pretty happy about the fact that you still have build diversity. Like, you can still choose to build a certain way based on what you need for the matchup that you're against, and you still have access to this throughput healing at a base level. And so Shadowstalk, lastly, was changed back to a support ult instead of being a personal damage cooldown. Tyrande still is really great at enabling hard gauge with her skill shot stun ability, and with Hunter's Mark, making it like, so if you combine her with Stitches or Diablo Garrosh, any tank that can isolate a single character, you just aim your skill shot stun from wherever that tank stuns their character first, and you just lock someone down and blow them the hell up with your Hunter's Mark and getting everybody to focus in on them. And bam, you've turned a 5v5 into a 5v4, and now you can do whatever you want. So I've seen a lot of people like on the forums talking about this rework as they're not looking forward to it. Anyone that's upset that Tyrande is now, quote, just another boring heal bot is honestly just bitter. Tyrande has some of the most powerful team utility buffs of any support in the whole game. She has global vision, she has a stun, she has armor penetration, she has a semi-hard cleanse, she gives spell armor, she gives movement speed buff, she gives attack speed buff, she slows enemies, she reduces their damage. Shadow Stalk can be an amazing engage or disengage and get the hell out of dodge tool. She's able to throw out really great healing now, and so she can still do long range burst damage if you choose to go into the owl build, and she can still chase people down and secure kills. She brings value to a team fight, and so now that her healing has been made stronger and is available to her earlier in a match, she's definitely not just a viable pick, but a valuable pick again. And instead of just being relegated to some solo queue meme pick that spends the whole match spamming your abilities mindlessly so that you can late game snipe Abathur. If you want a little bit insight into like Tyrande's strengths and weaknesses and how to play with her, so like I said, she's going to be able to have some pretty great group sustain healing, and as long as she can land her basic attack. So first of all, people need to remember to don't be in such a rush to clear a minion wave out as soon as it gets to the center. Like, leave those little guys alive and just fight the enemy heroes for a while to leave Tyrande some stuff to attack so that she can get the cooldown reduction on her heal ability so that she can keep healing you guys in the fight. So she can do that, but they are like small little frequent heals. So that means that if you're going up against a matchup that scales late game and is able to suddenly start chunking people for 75% of their health with one ability, Tyrande is not going to heal that. She does not have the power to like heal through that sort of burst damage. So you're much better. You much prefer playing into a composition that wants to just do poke damage than doing big chunk damage. That said, if you choose to go the auto attack path, especially with the Loons Chosen, again, you can get some huge single target healing off on a high value tank with that has a lot of HP, and you can really swing a fight. It's like a soft ancestral healing, essentially, if you can get this off and just land basic attacks for a few seconds. I mentioned to you guys she's really great for isolation picks, for turning a 5v5 into a 5v4 and such wise, and for tank busting also. Like, don't be afraid to just like, if a team has a soft front line, if they don't really have a bruiser to support their tank, pop Hunter's Mark and tell your team, hit this dude, kill that tank, and they have to retreat. They can't do anything without a front line. She's great at enabling that sort of thing, and I also told you guys she's really great at enabling dive. Characters like Genji and people that just want to jump in and do massive damage, Tyrande will jump in with you, and she'll heal you, and she'll give you movement speed so that you can keep weaving and so that you can get out, and then she'll get out with you, and if you take the Shadow Stalk ultimate, emergency escape tool right there. And it's also a global healing tool. It's amazing. And then you have so much flexibility in your talent choices. The rework overall is really great. I'm really happy about it. I'm really satisfied by what I see with it, and I'm really happy to try it out. So thanks for watching the video, guys. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of these. I don't plan to necessarily do this for every hero in the game, but I would definitely like to try to do it for every support in the game, I think. Again, because support is my preferred role, and most people hate playing support, so I would really like to be able to give some insight to the community of, like, how to play support and how to play with support better. Follow me on Twitter at Sigma is Greater if you want to see what I'm up to, and if you want to see me playing some more Heroes of the Storm, check out my Twitch channel, also at Sigma is Greater. Last but certainly not least, I want to give a shout out real quick to Mari Respert at Media Creates for helping me with the shirt that you guys see here. Thank you so much. Alunadore, see you guys next time.